This is Science with Chaos, and today's thought experiment gets weird really fast. What if food never spoiled? Imagine a world where nothing ever went bad. No expiration dates to check, no mold creeping in, no smell that tells you it's time to throw something away. Food would just stay the same. At first glance, this feels like one of those ideas that's obviously really good, like something humanity would have fixed already if it were possible. Less waste, less stress, less money thrown away. And that confidence, the feeling that this is clearly an upgrade, is exactly what makes this question dangerous. Your fridge basically turns into infinite storage. Leftovers don't have a countdown anymore. You stop worrying about what's going bad and start thinking about the food as something that's always there, waiting for whenever you're ready. Grocery shopping becomes less frequent and less urgent. You're no longer planning meals around expiration dates or trying to remember what needs to be eaten first. Food stops demanding attention. You could cook what you want, eat when you want, and never feel that subtle pressure of, I should probably use this before it goes bad. On the surface, it feels incredibly efficient. No spoiled milk, no forgotten leftover turning into science experiments, no guilt about food waste. Food becomes stable, predictable, permanent, and that sounds great until you start asking what spoilage was actually doing for us in the first place. Food doesn't spoil because nature is careless or inefficient. It spoils because biology is active. And just to be clear, when we're talking about food never spoiling, we're not talking about preservatives or shelf-stable food the way we have it now. Preservatives slow things down. They don't stop the process entirely. In this thought experiment, we're imagining something much more extreme. Food that simply does not decay at all. No breakdown, no rot, no biological cleanup happening in the background. The moment food exists, it becomes part of an ecosystem. Bacteria begin feeding on it. Fungi start breaking it down. Enzymes inside the food itself slowly change its structure. Oxygen reacts with it at a chemical level. All of that is decay, but it isn't random and it isn't pointless. It's regulation. Spoilage is how energy and nutrients get recycled back into the environment instead of piling up endlessly. It's how organic matter moves through the system rather than getting stuck. We tend to think of rot as failure, but in reality, it's part of the cleanup process. When food spoils, it isn't just becoming unusable, it is being processed into something else. So, if food never spoiled, all that activity would stop. And that doesn't just remove inconvenience, it removes an entire system that things quietly depend on. Once food stops expiring, something subtle but important changes in how we relate to it. Urgency disappears. When nothing goes bad, there's no pressure to act. No deadline forcing you to decide what to eat or use up. I'll eat it later stops meaning soon and starts meaning whenever. People begin keeping more food around, not because they're afraid of running out, but because there's no downside to holding onto everything. Pantries grow, fridges overflow, cabinets fill up. And as options multiply, decisions actually get harder. Meals become less intentional. Cooking feels less special because there's no risk involved anymore. Food loses some of its emotional weight when nothing is at stake. When nothing expires, nothing really feels important. Food shifts from something you actively manage into something you quietly ignore. Here's where the whole idea starts to flip. We tend to think of rot and spoilage as the problem, the things we're trying to avoid. But the more you zoom out, the clearer it becomes that rot isn't the failure of the system. It is the system. Decay is how nature cleans up after itself. It's how energy moves instead of getting stuck. When something isn't eaten, it's no longer useful in its current form. It doesn't just sit there forever. It gets broken down, redistributed, and reused somewhere else. Spoilage is what enforces limits. It creates an exit. It makes sure organic matter doesn't pile up endlessly with nowhere to go. So when you imagine a world where food never spoils, what you're really imagining is a world where nothing ever fully leaves the system. Food doesn't disappear, nutrients don't cycle back, and waste doesn't resolve itself. At first, that all sounds harmless, even efficient. But systems that can only accumulate and never clear themselves don't stay stable for very long. They clog, they slow down, and eventually they stop working the way they're supposed to. That's the part people miss. Spoilage isn't about food going bad, it's about keeping the system from filling up with things that never go away. This is where the consequences start to get serious. If food never spoiled, landfills wouldn't break it down. Compost wouldn't work the way it's supposed to. Organic waste would just accumulate, unchanged, taking up space without ever returning to the soil. Soil itself depends on decay to stay fertile. Forests rely on rot to recycle nutrients. Entire ecosystems are built on the assumption that organic matter eventually breaks down and feeds something else. Take that away, and those systems begin to fail. Nutrients get locked up instead of reused. Food chains break. Microorganisms lose their role. The circular loop that keeps ecosystems stable turns into straight lines that only grow. Just like sleep, spoilage is maintenance. It isn't pleasant and it isn't convenient, but it keeps the systems from collapsing under their own weight. Your body is part of the system too, whether we think about it that way or not. Inside your gut is a constantly changing ecosystem made up of trillions of bacteria, all competing, cooperating, and balancing one another. That balance depends on change. Different foods, different breakdown stages, and different microbes taking turns being dominant. Food spoilage plays a quiet role in that process. As food changes, different organisms interact with it, and that competition helps keep any one group from taking over. If food never spoiled, that dynamic shifts. Some microbes lose their place, others gain an advantage. Harmful organisms aren't suppressed in the same way, and the checks and balances that normally exist start to weaken. What's important here is that not all bacteria are enemies. Many of them exist specifically to keep other organisms under control. When you remove decay from the equation, you remove part of that balancing act. And the scary part is, if food never spoiled, it wouldn't stop with just food. And just like with ecosystems, the body doesn't usually fail all at once when balance is lost. It compensates, it adapts, it tries to keep things working. But over time, small imbalances add up. The system becomes more fragile, more sensitive, and more prone to tipping into unhealthy directions. So the problem isn't that food would suddenly become dangerous overnight. It's that the long-term stability of the system would slowly erode in ways that are hard to see until they've done real damage. So, when you really step back and think about it, food spoilage isn't just an inconvenience we haven't engineered our way out of yet. It's one of the quiet rules that keeps everything moving. It forces us to make decisions. It prevents endless accumulation. And it makes sure energy and nutrients don't get trapped in a form that never goes anywhere. When food spoils, it feels like loss. But what's actually happening is turnover. Things are being cleared out so something new can take their place. That process is messy, uncomfortable, and easy to resent. But without it, systems don't stay stable. They slowly clog up. A world where food never spoils sounds efficient, even utopian. Right up until you realize that nothing ever leaves a system anymore. Waste doesn't disappear. Balance doesn't reset. Problems just stack quietly in the background. Just like sleep, decay isn't a design flaw. It's maintenance. And when you remove maintenance, things don't immediately fall apart. They just stop recovering. That's why food that never spoils sounds like a perfect upgrade at first, and why it would probably create far bigger problems than it solves. This has been Science with Chaos. Enjoy your food.